Have you heard of the prophecy of the 70 weeks in Daniel chapter 9? I didn't think so. And yet, it is one of the most amazing miracles you will ever see. Daniel had just been reading Jeremiah's prophecy about the 70-year captivity when he became convicted of his own sin and the sins of his nation. He prayed for God to forgive Israel and fulfill the prophecy he'd given to Jeremiah to rebuild the nation of Israel. I suppose that Daniel was worried that God wouldn't fulfill his promise. But our God is an amazing God. And just to prove it, he sent Daniel an angel to comfort him with these words.
Know and understand this. From the time the word, decree, goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary.
Daniel wasn't just worried about himself. He was worried about his whole country. God comforts Daniel by telling him about a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. If Jerusalem was rebuilt, then Israel would survive as a nation. But God was bigger than all that. Not only did he reassure Daniel that Jerusalem would indeed be rebuilt, but also that the Anointed One would come. Daniel would have known that the Anointed One was the promised Messiah, the anointed king that would rule Israel forever. In this passage, God answers both concerns at the same time. The angel tells Daniel that the capital city of Israel, Jerusalem, will be rebuilt by royal decree. The decree that the angel is referring to is found in Nehemiah 2, 7 and 8. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the royal park, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. Knowing that Jerusalem was to be rebuilt by royal decree must have comforted Daniel, but that's only half the story. God also tells Daniel exactly when the Messiah will come. The angel says in verse 25, from the time the word decree goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. We know when this decree happens because the date is recorded in Nehemiah 2, 1a. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. According to historical records, this is 445 BC. But what is a 7? In order to understand the angel's message, we have to decipher the code. In ancient times, a week, or 7, would refer to 7 days or 7 years. So, which is it? Ezekiel 4:6. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. Numbers 14:34. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days. You explored the land. You will suffer for the sins and know what it is like to have me against you. So let's do the math. 7 times 7 plus 62 times 7 equals 483 years. There should be 483 years between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah. Let's check that out in history. The decree was 445 BC. Christ died around 32 AD. Jerusalem was destroyed 40 years later. In the future, there will be a war, and then 7 years later, there will be the end of time. The final week, or 7 years of history, is described in great detail in the Gospels and in the book of Revelation. But what is unique to Daniel is the precise calculation of years that precedes the coming of the Messiah, 483 years. But hold on a second. It's not 483 years from 445 BC to 32 AD. It's only 476 years. If you put this in your calculator, you probably got
477.
But you have to remember that the Gregorian calendar just jumps from 1 BC to 1 AD. There's no zero. So what's going on? There was no Messiah in 41 AD. Don't worry, your math is just fine. It's just your calculation of years that's a bit different. In the modern calendar, there are 365 days in a year, but not always. Every 4 years, we add on an extra day because of the Earth's revolution around the sun isn't exactly 365 days. But the ancient Hebrews didn't do it that way. They allowed for 360 days in the year. Being a Hebrew prophet, that's how Daniel would have calculated it. So let's do the math again.
Okay.
360 days times 483 prophetic years comes out to 173,880 total days. If I divide those days by 365 days in our modern calendar, we get 476 years plus 24 days. Guess what? There are exactly 476 years and 24 days between the decree in Nehemiah 2 and Jesus' triumphal entry in 32 AD. As a mortal man, there was no way Daniel could have known when Jesus would come to the temple or be crucified or when the temple would be destroyed. He died 500 years before any of that happened. Daniel's prophecy wasn't just amazing, it was literally a miracle. Do you believe in miracles? I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment and share this video with someone.